Today I need to do a bit of vlogging because I need to walk around a little bit, and in this video I'm going to show you how to replace the cartridge in a single lever mixer tap, the type that takes a ceramic disc cartridge. Now it's pretty simple to do, but there's a few things we need to discuss before we get on to that. Now this is the type of tap that I'm talking about. It's got one lever, on, off, hot, cold. And inside here, just below the handle, is a little cartridge that's got two ceramic discs in it, and those discs slide over each other. They've got holes in them, and that's what controls the water flow on and off and left to right with hot and cold. Now with these cartridge types taps, the cartridge sits just there under the handle, but they come in different sizes. There's a 25mm, a 35mm and a 40mm. So before you dismantle your tap, you have to try and decide which size that your tap takes. And what I do is a little trick. Just measure the diameter of the tap roughly. This one is 42, so you've got to subtract about 5 mils for the housing, or a bit more maybe, so that'll bring you down below 40. So the chances are this tap or faucet has got a cartridge that is size 35. It can't be a 40 because otherwise there would be no room for the housing. So then you go off and buy it, but there's another variation. Some of these are longer than the others, and there's a little pedestal at the bottom here, so you've got to also know that. So sometimes you have to take your faucet apart, see what kind of cartridge it takes, and then go and buy the new one. If you're lucky enough to have the manual for the tap, that might tell you, or if you go on the internet you might be able to find out there. So that's the basics of these taps. Now if you need to change the cartridge, if the tap is perhaps leaking there or dripping out the spout, then it's quite simple to do, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But just a couple of things I wanted to talk about. When you come to change the cartridge, obviously you've got to cut off the water. Now if you're lucky enough, the plumber would have put cut-off valves under the basin, where you can turn off hot and cold water at the tap, and you don't have to turn off the mains. If you haven't got that, obviously you've got to go and turn off the mains. Now, some of the high-end expensive taps will have specialized cartridges. They don't take standard off-the-shelf cartridges, and that's a problem because sometimes, apart from it being far more expensive to replace the cartridge, but sometimes you can't even get the cartridges because the tap's no longer manufactured. So then you've got a real problem because then you've got to replace the whole faucet unit. This whole thing has to be replaced, and that's pretty simple on the basin because you just screw this one off and take it off and put the next one on. But if you're talking about a shower, for instance, here you've got the body of the tap is built into the wall. So in order to replace that, you've got to break the wall all around there and redo the plumbing. Then you've got to re-drywall that area, seal it so that it doesn't leak any water, and then re-tile it. So it's a major operation, very expensive if you can't get that cartridge. It's not advisable to try and break the cartridge open and service it, but in a case like this you might try it. And I've seen people honing the ceramic discs and that sort of thing, which is fine if it works, but very often it doesn't work. So my advice is strongly to make sure when you're buying a tap, if you've got the option, buy one that takes a standard off-the-shelf generic replacement cartridge. Right, now for the purposes of this demonstration, I've mounted a spare tap or faucet that I have lying around just on a wooden board so that you can see better what I'm doing. Now the first thing you have to do, the cartridge is always located near the handle. It's attached to the handle, so that's your clue as to where to go. And always, if you're new at this, take a photograph before you start so that you know how things came apart. So when you're putting it back together again, you know what it's supposed to look like. Now the first thing you have to do is there's a little cover here that covers a grub screw that's holding the handle onto the cartridge inside. So you have to loosen that grub screw before you can take the handle off. Now the easiest way to do that is just lift the handle up, and then you can see the grub screw better. And usually it's just a little rubber plug which you can just pull out with your fingers. But note which side hot is and which side cold is. Hot is usually to the left, but I have had occasions where it's not. So just make a note of that. Then you pull that out. And what I always do is have a little tub to put all the parts in. Always do that, otherwise you might lose something. And a good tip is to put the plug in the basin or the sink if you're working on the sink, so that if you drop anything, it doesn't go down the plug hole and get lost forever. The other thing is to just throw a towel or something over the sink or the basin, so that if you drop a spanner or something, you don't chip the basin. Right, so inside this hole is a little grub screw. Now I'm just shining a light in there, and if you look right in that hole, you can see the little grub screw, which has got an Allen key hexagonal type fitting, and that needs to be undone. And normally it's about a 2.5 size Allen key, one of the hexagonal ones. I like the ones with the little ball on the end because it's so much easier to get them into the grub screw. So we'll put that in there and just feel around until we hit the grub screw. If you can't find it, then obviously a torch or something like that will help you, but I can feel I'm in the hole now, so I'm undoing it. Now you don't have to undo it all the way, you just have to loosen it, because it's just gripping the shaft of the cartridge. So rather leave it in place so that it doesn't fall out and go down the plug hole. And then you just wiggle it a little bit like that, and off it comes. Keep it safe. And there's your cartridge. That's the top of the cartridge. This is just a little facade, a ring to cover the brass so that it all looks the same as the tap. So that has to come off first. Now if that ring's a bit tight, you might need to use one of these, which is a strap wrench, and that is great because it doesn't do any scratching on your chromium plating, and that should get you going. And then you can just get it off by hand like that. Keep it safe somewhere. This brass screw here is holding the cartridge down. It's not part of the cartridge, it's part of the tap or the faucet. So you've got to loosen that to get the cartridge out. So the other thing is to have a little wrench handy that's going to go to that size. And you might find when you're turning it that the whole tap turns, or the whole faucet turns. So then you might need to put your strap wrench down here and just hold it in place while you're loosening. And then that one again you can finish off with your finger. The job of this screw is to press the cartridge down so that it seals against the base of the tap housing. And I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, so there's that out the way, keep it safe. There's your cartridge, and just taking it out, just slips out like that. And if you look underneath, there's the holes for mixing the water. This hole here is just a mixing chamber. It's a blank hole, and it allows the water to mix before it comes out the spout. These two here are hot and cold inlets. So the water comes in these two, gets mixed there, and then comes out the spout. And I'll just show you how that works. That's off, and then as I turn it on, you'll see those two hot and cold opening up. And if I turn it left, one of them closes, and if I turn it right, the other one closes and the other one opens. And that's how your water is mixed and comes out this central hole here. When it's off, obviously both of these are closed. Right, now looking down the barrel of the tap, that's where the cartridge fits, and I'll just show you what all those holes are about. So that's the hot inlet, that's the cold inlet, and they go into these two holes in the cartridge. The cartridge will be fitting down on there. Then the water gets mixed inside the cartridge and comes out this hole, and that hole lines up inside the barrel with this big hole here, and from there it travels down the spout and comes out the spout. So that's how that works. And then if you look closely, there's two little blank holes. There's one there and one there, and those holes are to locate these two plastic lugs on the cartridge. So once those are located in those two holes, you know the cartridge is in the right place. Now it's very important when you're fitting a new cartridge to make sure that that bottom there is really clean, but you've got to be careful. Don't create any scratches on the bottom there, because then it might not seal. Only use a cloth, get it really nice and clean, and then before you put your new cartridge in, quite a good idea to just put a little bit of silicone grease on that silicone rubber seal. Put it in there, locate it in those two locating holes, and then tighten down with the brass screw to keep everything in place and seal against that silicone rubber seal there. Right, now we're ready to show you how to fit the cartridge. The first thing I normally do is just put a little bit of silicone grease on the silicone rubber seal. Not a lot, you just have to smear a little bit all over with your finger like that. That just helps it to settle in nicely when you're tightening down the screw. And then obviously have a look inside, see where the two lug holes are, and more or less line up these two lugs with the lug hole before you drop it in. Then you drop it in and you just twist left or right, there it goes. The two lugs are now in place, and then your next step is this brass screw, which is going to tighten down the cartridge so that you compress that silicone rubber seal that I showed you against the base of the tap, and that's what makes your seal and allows the water to mix without any leaks. It's advisable to do a little bit of tightening with a wrench here, but don't overdo it because it should seal. You just got to make sure you've got to the point where it gets a little bit firm. There we go. I'm not going crazy, and that should seal it. Then the next step is to put your little facade on, your little cover to cover that brass screw. Just finger tighten it, don't tighten it very hard. And then finally your handle, that's the slot for the lever of the cartridge. So you'll just slip that over the lever like that. Turn it up so that you can access that hole where the grub screw is. The grub screw, I didn't take it out completely, so it's in there. I can see it, I can just line it up. You might need a torch if you're in a bit of a dark place, and then just give it a tiny little tweak. You don't have to go too hard there. Then finally, we just put the little button back that covers the grub screw hole, and making sure that hot's on the left and cold's on the right. And that's your job done. Very easy. And then obviously you turn the water on again and you check for leaks. If you get any leaks there or there, it could be that you didn't tighten the cartridge down tight enough with the screw, and that silicone rubber seal is not sealing properly, so you could just take it apart and tighten that a bit further. If it's dripping out of there and not leaking anywhere else, then it's probably a faulty cartridge, so you might have to take it back to the shop. But they're very reliable, these cartridges, and they probably last about 5 or 10 years. So you shouldn't have to fiddle with this tap again for a while. Now I just wanted to show you a slightly different tap. This is a kitchen sink tap, and it's slightly different in anatomy. But if you remember that the cartridge is always attached to the handle, you'll know where to find it. So, right, now I'll just show you quickly how to undo this one. The grub screw for this one is not under the handle, it's there. So again, I'll just get my little Allen key in there, feel around, there it is, I've got it. Just loosen it slightly, there it comes off. Put that in there, there we go. Take the facade off, and there's our cartridge, and there's our brass ring. This one's slightly different, so we just put the wrench on there and loosen it. Get it going, there we go. Take it out. Cartridge just comes out very easily. This is a different size cartridge. This is a 35mm cartridge. The rubber seal has come off, it's stuck inside there, I can feel it. I'll show you that in a minute, but that doesn't matter if you're putting a new one in. You just take it off and just make sure that the base where it seals against is clean, and maybe put a bit of silicone grease on there as well. I'll just show you inside. There you can see the rubber seal left behind, and there's a lug hole, and the other lug hole is there. So it's pretty much the same, and then you've got your 3 holes, your mixing hole and your hot and cold inlets. Now just one final point. Whenever I'm changing a cartridge or servicing these mixing taps, it's always advisable to check the filter. At the bottom of the spout here is a filter that filters out any debris that's coming through with the water, and sometimes if that gets really blocked up, you can get back pressure, which then might make your cartridge fail. Also, it interrupts your water flow, so you don't want that to be blocked. A little flat surface there, so you just get your spanner on there, loosen it a little bit, screw it out, and check inside there. This it's a brand new tap, so that's pretty clean. But I have had occasion where that's completely silted up and the tap's not flowing properly. So always important to do that, because that can affect the lifespan of your cartridge as well, as I said, through back pressure. And then taking a look at the other tap, same story. This one has got a little screw mechanism which you have to screw out. This one's got a little bit more muck, you can see some sand around there, so that needs to be rinsed off nice and clean. And a final point concerning these filters: if for any reason someone is working on underground pipes that lead to your water supply, I would suggest you're very cautious which taps you turn on first, because the first tap you turn on, all the debris that could have got into that pipe from people working on underground pipes, sand and stuff gets into the pipes. First tap you switch on is where all that muck's going to go. So it's quite good advice is to perhaps wait a while, let all your neighbors switch on their taps first, drain some of the silt out of the system, and when you turn on your taps, make sure, if you've got a garden, use a garden tap, do some watering, something like that first, before you turn on any of your house taps. And these ceramic mixing taps are particularly sensitive to grit and stuff. So if you've got other conventional, the old type tap with the tap washer, turn one of those on first, and then last of all turn on your mixing taps. So that's just a final tip. Now, if you found this useful, please like and share this video and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already done so. And if you have any comments, we'd love to hear from you. Just scroll right down to the bottom and you'll find the comments section there. And if you'd like notification when our next video comes out, just click on the little bell next to the subscribe button. Thank you very much for watching.